Hey guys, it's Dexion the Gamer, and welcome back to another episode. And today we're going to be covering Resident Evil Requiem, going over DLSS options, going over benchmarks, and just to set the tone first, I will report that I am on the latest Nvidia driver, and I know some people have issues with voltage and clocks. However, my GPU doesn't seem to have any issues with that because I naturally run an undervolt to begin with, and I haven't lost any performance here. But what I did do is I did gain performance from the previous driver, which was I believe it was 591.80 or something like that. I'll correct that in the description. But in any case, let's go over our options here. So we're going to be testing at 4K resolution, and we are going to basically have all the settings maxed out. We have path tracing on, motion blur, I'm going to leave that on, hair strands on, graphics quality. It says custom, but basically everything is at the highest, as you can see here. And I'm going to be starting with, this game always wants to default to performance, but I'm going to start with DLAA and no frame generation. And reflex latency, the latency is on, everything else is going to be maxed out. With that said, we're going to get into our main story here. And I'm going to be just actually starting a new game because of the that scene, the beginning scene is the hardest to run, so I'm just going to start this way.
Sorry.
Alright, so in that opening scene that you just saw there, I do have it running on DLAA. And this is the typical performance that you will see with DLAA, especially with all these NPCs walking around here. If I move it over to take a shot at Grace from ahead, you can see it creeps up into the 30 frame per second mark. Latency is pretty high at 72 milliseconds, and again, this is with reflex on. So off, I can tell you that it's about 100 plus milliseconds of input lag without reflex. So that's definitely not something I would want to be playing with. So, and I can tell that the GPU is still not working as fast as it should be. I think if you roll back to 576.88, you will get the max performance out of the GPU. I didn't do that today because this GPU does actually run faster than the previous driver, not the one that they pulled, but the one before that. So anyway, this is DLAA, and the only thing I can mention is that if you look at the grates here on the right side of the screen, they do tend to shimmer a little bit if you pan the camera, slightly up. You can see that right there. They're shimmering a little bit there. So hopefully that's something that Capcom can target and fix. I don't think that was present with the older driver. It could have been, but I can't remember at this point. But let me know if you guys want to see a comparison between a couple of different drivers. I'll be more than happy to do that. So what I did notice is that if you go to DLSS Quality, it does solve that shimmering issue with the sewer grates here. So with that being said, we're going to go into our settings and switch it over to DLSS Quality. Okay, and so we have it on quality now, and we went from about 25 or so frames per second up to 41, 42. 1% lows jumped up as well. Frame time is looking steady. Latency went down to about 48 milliseconds, so this is what I would consider a playable response time. And as you can see on the right side here, these sewer grates, they're not shimmering anymore. So DLSS actually looks better than native in this particular title, which is something that's really, really interesting. Also, the rain seems to get a little bit more aggressive as you walk side to side. I don't know if that's something, path tracing bug or whatever, but anyways, it's not really all that much of an issue. So GPU wattage goes down to sub 400 watts, and again, I am running an undervolt, and I will leave the undervolt settings in the description. So I'm just going to walk up and down here to get a good sense of how everything looks, how everything responds. And I would say that this is the first step to being playable. And, again, we are running a path trace scene here with a bunch of NPCs. And it actually does get quite a bit faster if you go further down here and get into the cutscene, which I'll show you right now. So as you can see here, it jumped up right away to about 50 to 60 frames per second in this cutscene. And as we continue to go further, it will increase even more. Interestingly enough, now the GPU is working harder. So I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe there's a pipeline issue with the game itself in the engine that just doesn't allow the GPU to run at full power in that beginning scene because of some kind of bottleneck. I don't know.
Oh, you're FBI?
Yeah.
And as you can see right here, we are jumping up to 70 frames per second at this particular scene here. Definitely something going on with the noise and ray reconstruction effects going on. I heard it's even worse in ray tracing mode.
Why am I even here?
Game does look absolutely beautiful with path tracing though. Definitely cinematic. Also, just worth it to mention that I do have the modification that gets rid of that disgusting film grain. So film grain is disabled in all of my benchmarks and all my playthroughs. And if you guys do want that, I will link the Nexus Mod in the description. It's very easy to install. You just have to install basically 2 mods into your game directory and everything works automatically right off the bat. So I'm gonna end this run here on DLSS Quality by going into this little section here with the flashlight. And yeah, so this is something that is going on with this game. I don't know if you guys can see it on YouTube, but there is a little bit of a boiling going on when you point the flashlight at certain surfaces. It looks like certain surfaces that are reflective. So if I point it here, nothing really happens. But if I point it at this wall here, you can kind of see it. It's a little bit sizzly. You can see it in this shot really good here too. And this is persistent in all upscaling modes. So when ray reconstruction is using its upscaler, this is what's going on. Does not happen in DLAA mode. But what's also interesting to notice is that if you switch it over to ray reconstruction preset E, if you used Nvidia Profile Inspector, that boiling artifact goes away. But I did hear that it does cause some other issues, and the devs decided not to use preset E. So probably might want to just stick with preset D and just kind of live with it if you're on path tracing. All right, so now we're going to start from the beginning on DLSS Balanced, just to see what that's going to look like. All right, so now we have it on DLSS Balanced. Frame generation is still off. And now we're able to get about 50 frames per second in this scene here. Not really noticing any difference between the quality and the balance setting. And it does seem to tone down that weirdness going on with the raindrops on the street. Not seeing any flickering issues going on with the sewer grates as well. So that's good. Latency is about 43 milliseconds right now, which is pretty good, even at 50 frames per second. For a story game like this, 50 frames per second to me is okay. I can play like this between 50 to 60 frames a second without even using frame generation. But I can definitely agree with the sentiment that's going on with that. The game is probably just not optimized that well at this scene. Either that or the drivers, because the drivers do seem to give you a better result if you go back to some older drivers. Alright, and going to this scene now. Here you are at 90 frames per second, and I'm still noticing that weird boiling, shimmering effect going on behind the gate here with the volumetric fog and the rain. So either Ray Reconstruction is having some trouble there, or it's something with the game itself.
Why am I even here?
Everything still looks nice and sharp, not noticing any softness in the image. Probably just a tad bit of ghosting going on. Not really going to be anything distracting though. And now as you can see, latency dropped tremendously. It's now at around 24 milliseconds, which is great for responsiveness. Everything looks really, really good. And yeah, so we're still getting this boiling artifact here. It's not really different from DLSS Quality, which is good. And so with that said, we're going to start our run again on DLSS Performance and see where that takes us. And so we're loaded with DLSS Performance, and everything still looks pretty decent from what I can tell. I'm not seeing that shimmering issue going on the grace or anything else. And we're just going to do our walk here, getting about 60 frames per second. So definitely not seeing too much performance boosts from the different DLSS upscaling modes in this section here, but you do really see a big boost when you get to the next cutscene. Everything still looks nice and sharp. I'm not noticing any additional ghosting or anything coming from like the wires up top here on the L. And L means raised subway. If you're not from New York City, don't worry about it. Response times are looking really good in the 30 millisecond range right now, and everything still looks really good. I can probably notice just a tad bit of softness, but it's not going to take away from the overall, excuse me, from the overall, robust sharpness of 4K. Alright, so now as we get into this scene here, you can see that noise effect going crazy. So if you look at the gate here, it's looking really, really sizzly, really, really boily, and it looked a ton better on DLSS Balanced and Quality. As you get closer, you can see it starts to dissipate a little bit, starts to go away, but you can see that fog back there really causing all types of issues. And just moving it along here, everything else looks really, really good. We're running over 100 frames per second now in this area. And these are the normal clocks that I get on my 5090. Again, I do run an undervolt, and mine specifically is 0.925 millivolts at 2800 megahertz flat. So I don't have any of those issues with the new driver. Yep, so I'm going to end it here and start our run again, and we're going to go back to DLSS quality using frame generation. Alright, so we just activated quality with frame generation 2x, and so let's see how that looks like now. Alright, so this is definitely looking really good. As far as our latency, let me just bring that up here. Latency is at about 50 milliseconds right now. And I'm not seeing any weird ghosting artifacts from the frame generation. Everything looks good as far as, you know, panning the camera back and forth on thin wires and things like that. So far so good. Not seeing any issues with the sewer grates. And 52 milliseconds is probably what I would consider still good, especially if you're on a controller. It's still good to play with. It doesn't feel sloppy or anything like that. Definitely much better than DLAA out of the gate.
Did you hear Eric was promoted?
This game does use quite a bit of VRAM though. So I peak at about 16 gigs. So even on cards like the 5080, you'll have to, you know, possibly compromise a little bit with DLSS. Alright, so in this scene here, we're getting 130 frames per second, which is definitely smooth. And this is probably what you'll be expecting to see going forward in the rest of the game, because that opening scene there is the most demanding. And now latency has dropped down to 36 milliseconds, which is even better than what it was before. And with that said, I'm just going to keep it here for the rest of, you know, just take it here for the rest of the video. So now we're going to go back and run again on DLSS quality with frame generation ×4. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to go with 3x first, just to give you guys a thorough review. And then we're going to go through everything with balanced and performance as well. So in this opening scene here, as you can see, latency, it did go up a couple of milliseconds, maybe like 3 or so. But that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Not seeing... Not seeing anything crazy as far as artifacts going on. Image quality looks really good. I could probably see, yeah, I could see a little bit of ghosting going on with the hair, and that's, well, it's actually not the hair. No, I take that back. That's not an artifact. That's just the raindrops showing up, bouncing off the light. So that's actually pretty cool. Everything still looks really nice and sharp. No complaints there.
Did you hear Eric was promoted?
And at 136 frames per second, 135 in that opening scene, you know, keeping things at DLSS quality, I will call this probably a very playable experience if you want to maintain visual quality and get the smoothness of 130 frames per second in that very demanding scene. Alright, so as you can see here, the gate looks so much better with DLSS quality. On performance, it was just looking really, really bad. But on quality, you can see just a little bit of sizzling going on, but it's nowhere near as bad as quality. Now we're at 170 frames per second, and
Why am I even here?
latency went down to about 37, 38 milliseconds, which is probably where you'll have it at for the rest of the game. So that's great. I will call this an A+ experience moving forward. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is just put it on DLSS Balanced and frame generation 3x on the next run, just to see what that looks like. Sorry guys, but before I go to DLSS Balanced, I'm just going to do the frame generation 4x just to see what that does to latency and if that introduces any artifacts. Alright, so now we are jumping up into the 60s,
Should be around here.
and I'm getting some weird frame pacing issue going on here. That's really, really weird. So frame generation 4x might not be the way to go. Oh, now I could definitely see some weird ghosting going on. And so I don't recommend this. Let's see if it gets better if I move to the next scene. Yeah, I'm just starting to see a lot of little glitchy looking frame mistakes going on. Yeah, you saw that right there, probably with the hair, right? Alright, so as I'm moving the camera around with FrameGen 4X, yeah, it's just looking, but it could have something to do with the screen tearing as well, because this is running past my VSync. So if you guys experience weird frame hitching or frame jumping going on, I don't see it in the frame time meter, which is really strange. So it could just be my monitor choking on the 215 frame per second while it's at 160 hertz.
Why am I even here?
Yeah, I don't know. Usually screen tearing looks a bit different. There's something else going on, so I'm not sure if I can recommend Frame Generation 4X on quality mode. I'm going to test it out to see if it works better on the other presets as well. And so with that said, I'm going to end it here, and I'm going to restart with Balanced on the 2X mode and take it from there. Alright, so now we're starting off with Balanced 2X, and we're getting 100 frames per second here at the opening scene. Yeah, that frame juddering that I had is gone. Everything looks so much smoother now. And this is probably my go-to as far as visual quality and frame rate, speed, smoothness. Temps are looking really good. Wattage is not even going to 100 watts. I'm sorry, 400 watts. Latency is really good in 40 milliseconds at this opening scene here. Not seeing those weird, crazy artifacts that I had before.
Oh man, she was pissed. She forgave me in the end.
And everything looks really good. Alright, skipping to this scene now. You can see that the gate looks just a little bit more noisier than it does on DLSS Quality, but that's something I guess I just have to put up with. And moving around this scene here, everything is looking great. Really smooth frame rate right now. Extremely smooth frame rate. Getting near 150 frames per second, dipping down into the 29 millisecond range as far as input lag, which is awesome for a slow-paced story game like this. That'll never give you a problem. Alright, so we're going to switch over to 3x frame generation mode on the next scene, and I'll see you there. Alright, so we just hit up frame generation 3x mode. And if you guys are getting anything out of this, please do give a like and subscribe, and let me know if you want to see any more testing, especially with the driver versions on this game here. And right off the bat, jumping up to 140 frames per second in this scene here. Not seeing any crazy glitching going on with the frame rate pacing. Everything looks really smooth, and that's great. So this is another option if you just want to get some extra frames out of your scene here.
Yeah. Of course.
Did you hear Eric was promoted? That asshole? What the hell are you managers?
Everything still looks really sharp. Getting a little bit of screen tearing, but that's to be expected since it is rising further than my hertz limit on my monitor. And in this scene here, we are now going into the 200 frames per second range. That gate, doesn't look any worse than it did with frame generation 2x, so that's good news. Latency still hovering around the 30s, so not really much different than it was before with the 2x mode. And that's always good to see. Yeah, if you're on a 5080 or 5090, even a 5070 Ti, I'd probably choose 2x or 3x mode. Leave it in DLSS Balanced. Turn that noise grain off so you don't have to see that. See, she looks so much better with that crap off. And with that said, I'm going to restart it on the 4x mode just to see if we have that problem that we did before. Okay, so we're back on frame generation 4x mode, and yeah, I'm still getting some weird issue here with the frames skipping around. So with that said, I'm not even going to bother to go through the whole run with this. I'm just going to scratch 4x mode off on this game. Something's broken about it, and either Nvidia or Capcom need to fix this in a patch or another driver. So with that said, I'm going to be going over performance, starting at performance and frame generation 2x. Alright, so we're at performance and frame generation 2x, and this is probably where the game wants you to be, because they always put you back on performance as soon as the game starts. And in this opening scene here, we're at about 120 frames per second, which is good.
Should be around here.
And you know, everything still looks okay. Probably just a tad bit sharper, just a tad. And personally, I would keep it on balanced and maybe 2 or 3x mode, since you're not really suffering from latency. But this is an option as well, especially if you're on a between 27 and 32 inch monitor. You're really not going to tell too much of a difference between balanced and performance, because you're just getting such a high pixel density to begin with. Alright, so in this scene here, yeah, things are really, I mean, the rain probably adds a little bit to the effect going on here with the gate, but that's something you can really see. Alright, so now we're in the low 20s as far as our latency, which is good. You know, not too much better than it was before on balanced and frame generation 2 or 3x, but this is still another option to consider if you want to, max out those frame rates. Alright, so we're going to leave it here, and we're going to go to the frame generation 3x mode on performance, and I'll see you there. Alright, so we're on performance and frame generation 3x mode, and everything looks pretty similar to the 2x mode. 163 frames per second now, looking great. Not seeing any fuzziness going on or anything with the image quality. Everything still looks about the same as it did before. So let's walk down the scene here. Yeah, everything is still looking really good. And again, guys, I can't emphasize this enough. If you get a chance and you're playing this game, please turn off that film grain. It is so ugly. I don't know why Capcom locked that into the game as if we wanted this stuff. I have all the other post-processing effects turned off as well, except for depth of field, which I do believe adds a cinematic effect to the game. So I did leave that one on, but everything else, the lens distortion and chromatic aberration, which I think is disgusting, all that stuff is off. Alright, running through this last scene here, we're hitting 240 frames per second now, and latency is in the low 20s. So you really can't go too wrong here. It's up to you how far you want to push your frame rate, and you do have the resources to do that.
Why am I even here?
Buttery smooth experience here. Everything looks really sharp. So with that said, I'm going to end this video here, and again, please do consider giving me a like and a subscribe for future content. I do have more plans coming, and again, let me know in the comments if you want to see me do other videos on switching around drivers or anything like that. With that being said, peace.